Welcome to Optimal Game State. Today we're looking at the new Darkoath faction in Warcry. This sub-faction of the Slaves of Darkness appeared earlier in the year with a big box release, and now we finally have the rules for it in Warcry. If you're not aware, we've just had a big FAQ arrive for Warcry, and along with it we have got a few new factions, which does include the Darkoath. This is separate to Darkoath's Savagers, which do look very similar, but should maybe be considered their own tribe or something. This is also distinct to the Chaos Marauders, who are part of the Slaves of Darkness warband, despite those miniatures being clear replacements for the very dated Marauder models. If you check the Warhammer community website, there are two PDFs up there which we're interested in for this faction. We have the Darkoath PDF, which has the rules for the main Darkoath fighters that appeared in the big box. We also have Brand's Oathbound, which was a single box release with 5 character models that appear in the new Darkoath book, and some also appear in Warhammer Plus video monsters. So the first PDF has all the generic fighters, and the second PDF has a small number of models that can each only be taken once. So it's similar to a Bladeborn warband, but without the options for other Chaos factions to ally them in if they're not heroes. Before we get stuck into numbers, I thought it might be worthwhile to talk about who the Darkoath are. These are replacing the older and dated Chaos Marauders, who were Chaos worshipping clans from the northern wastes of the Old World. The Darkoath are somewhat similar, but I think a far more interesting approach, at least from what I could glean from the Darkoath novel. These are essentially the survivors of the Great Betrayal when Sigmar and the good gods walked away from the realms and took refuge in Azir. In this new world, the tribes learned to fight to survive. They also began to better understand the gods of chaos, fickle and callous as they are. They were the only ones who answered when the Darkoath called. Unlike the many chaos cults across the realms, the Darkoath seek to strike a careful balance. They swear oaths to the chaos gods, and if those oaths are fulfilled, then the gods aid them. They do not, however, swear allegiance to the gods, for that would mean losing themselves. So it's a delicate game. Give the chaos gods enough to gain their aid, but not so much that you would become their slaves. Here we have our plot. As you can see, it's a decent spread across the board, and a lot of the fighters are near the top of the damage bracket, which is always good to see. Not the tippy tops, but it is a healthy position. Notably, we don't have anything less than 70 points though, so we don't have any cheap chaff. On the other end, we do have that very, very expensive but also crazy damage Wilderfiend. And that, incidentally, is what happens to one of the Darkoath if they lose that game with the Chaos Gods and end up receiving maybe too many gifts. There are 2 generic abilities that almost anyone in the warband can use. I say almost, as both have clauses to prevent the Wilderfiend from using them. The first is a double Oath of Murder. This is where they swear to the Chaos Gods that they are going to kill an enemy fighter. They then become oathed for the remainder of the battle. We should probably get a token or something to go along with it just to keep track of those. If they do manage to kill an enemy, they lose that oathed trait and instead become favored. That will be relevant later. As a gift from the Chaos Gods, the warband gets a double one, which can then be used for a rush or an onslaught or an oath for another fighter. The second ability we have here is Reaction Glorious Death. This is a reaction. After being targeted by a melee attack, if that attack would then kill your fighter, you get a double one. So you're going to be spending your action before you know whether it's going to kill them or not. But if it does, you're going to get a double out of it. So you're losing the fighter, that's a decent replacement. If you lost a hero, then that becomes a triple. And if that fighter was favored, then you get a quad one. Reactions are tricky to use because it takes up an action. But if you're expecting to die, then that's a really good time to use one. We will see more abilities like this as we go on, where they will have a normal effect, and then if you have the favored trait, then the effect will be more beneficial. Although I do keep calling them traits, but it doesn't actually refer to them as a trait anywhere. They're just kind of a thing. I guess conceptually, they maybe could be a rune mark or something like that, but yeah, it's not really detailed. Anyway, that's the pure side. To go back to the Oath of Murder, there are a few different ways to look at this. The first, of course, is to use the double when you think you're going to get a kill. So you take a non-oathed fighter, like your like your annual performance review. You promise to do the thing you're expecting to do anyway, and then the fighter becomes favored, and then you get double back to use again, maybe with someone else or power different ability. The second way to use it, that I think is a little bit more interesting, is to take doubles that you don't have a plan for. So, for example, when you're moving around on turn one, you could obviously spend doubles in Power Rush, or you could just sink them into fighters to oath up your fighters. And then you're going to get those doubles back later in the game if they manage to get kills. And yeah, that'll potentially give you kind of more punch and more impact later in the turn. So yeah, in theory, you could oath up 3 fighters turn one, and then in turn three, you get some kills with them. You get 3 more doubles on top of all the abilities that you already had, which lets you get more kills, and then it just kind of escalates. Of course, it does all rely on getting a kill. So it is very much more one of those win more strategies. And it probably will involve having some of your heroes picking on some chaff early in the game. Notably, this warband does not have a battle trait. Presumably, they were designed around the same time as the Darkoath came out, which I think was April. Um, so this warband, I mean, was designed around the same point as the models, but then the battle traits were probably designed later because they only appeared in one of the recent boxes. And that had battle traits for all of the warbands that were available at the time, but obviously the Darkoath weren't around. So that might explain why there. We might maybe see a errata or something. I think if the Darkoath had the Slaves to Darkness battle trait, for example, what that does is it gives +3 to the value of abilities, while more enemy fighters are taken out than friendly fighters. Then that would turn all those double ones into double fours, and so on. That could be really good. And I think a lot of the other battle traits do stuff like that. They manipulate the numbers. And because you're getting all these double ones, and if fighters go down, triple ones, quad ones, being able to boost the value could be very, very interesting. But yeah, we'll have to see. That could be another 6 months before we get any update on that. That's just the way it is. So right now, no battle trait. So yeah, no advantage to stay purely Darkoath. You can ally in any other warbands and then or any other warbands heroes, and it'll be just the same. Before I really get stuck into the fighter profiles, just as a point of reference, I just want to talk about this. So this is what I consider to be a baseline for any fighter. As I understand it, if you work out the points based on the damage and then work out points based on the wounds and then average them out, you get a really good starting point. You then make some percentage adjustments based on other factors. So how fast the fighter is, what the range of the weapon is, and so on. So this means that going fast is going to cost you more points if you're, a big chunky chimera than it is if you're a grot. And that does kind of make sense. This is my best guess at working out how the GW guys do it. And it is my frame of reference when I'm talking about whether a fighter's worth playing or not. So I will be talking about this again. I'll be talking about the wounds they have and whether the points cost is about right, and the same with the damage. But these are the numbers I'm looking at, just as a point of reference. All right, our first fighter we're going to have a look at is the Darkoath Chieftain on Warsteed. So this is kind of what I'm talking about. The wounds here are about the cost of a 233 point fighter. The weapon damage is about the cost of a 150 point fighter. Those average out to about 192. And that toughness 3 is below the standard 4, so you can give it a -5%. That speed 10 is super fast, and I estimated around plus 35%. So with that 192, we end up with a 30% increase, so an adjustment, which ends up the points around 250. So based on what we have there, that 220, this is a good deal. Now, that isn't always true, and it especially can be difficult with the cavalry troops, because cavalry troops tend to have high health, high number of wounds, and a large increase in movement. So you tend to be able to take a lot of hits, get to places fast, but then often they don't do much damage for their points. In this case, it's actually pretty good though. So I want to compare this guy to the classic Varangard with Demon Forged Blade, which I think is a preferred choice. And honestly, this fighter does compare well. The Chieftain has 3 less toughness and 2 less wounds, but it's still 28 wounds to chew through, so that's a chunky amount. The attack profile is a little bit below, so it's 7.5 average damage on the Vanguard, but a 20-point Might Blessing would actually bring the damage closer to it at 7.3. So I think it's valid to look at this fighter as a potentially cheaper Vanguard, which is very exciting. Where this fighter differs, of course, is on the abilities. The Vanguard has a double to increase attacks by half the value of the double, and also has a triple Champion of Darkness, which gives an extra move and an extra attack after getting a kill. Those are really fantastic abilities that are very synergistic with a big, scary, fast thing killing things. For the Chieftain, things are less exciting, but actually quite interesting. We've already seen the generic Oath of Murder ability, and then this fighter is a good contender to be in the right place to get that kill in. He also has a triple special to him, and it's called Warleader. Now, I'll go into the ability properly in a second, but it's a variation on the Inspiring Presence, which isn't getting you extra attack dice or any extra actions. So while I quite like the stats on this, and I really like the model, and I've actually picked up the kit myself to build, this isn't a Vanguard. So the big difference is with the abilities. That Vanguard is going to do a lot more work. But yeah, as I said, I have a model. I'm definitely going to be trying it out, and I'm quite interested in it. So the other option for the Chieftain is the on foot version. So it's 80 less points at 140, but does have the same damage, 8 less wounds, and a normal walking pace of 4 inches. Weirdly, the armor increases. I'm not quite sure why. For both damage and wounds, this is slightly above the baseline, which is nice, but not particularly special. Just kind of what we're looking for. This is actually an old model. I think this originally came out with the Warhammer Quest Silver Tower, and probably was the first model to kind of inspire the Darkoath team and ideas. So yeah, you've got the kind of the belt circle thing, which we've seen again and again, and there's kind of some other themes there. So I think this was probably kind of the original Darkoath idea. Now, there is a model profile of the same name in the Slaves to Darkness warband, but they are different. So they have the same name, they have the same model, but they definitely have different abilities. They might even have some slightly different stats. So just kind of keep that in mind. So you have 2 different profile options, which is actually quite interesting. We're going to look at the ability though. So this is the Warleader ability that we were talking about a second ago. Now, bear with me on this one because it's a bit awkwardly worded and potentially needs an FAQ or some errata. So we pick a friendly fighter within 6 inches who has not yet activated. You can activate that fighter immediately after this fighter's activation ends. And that's just a normal Inspiring Presence so far. So it's triple Inspiring Presence, no change. The next line gives you a bonus if the Chieftain is favored. And that bonus lets you pick up to 2 other friendly fighters as well. Now, those aren't going to get to activate, but they will benefit from the next step, which I do think kicks in even if the Chieftain isn't favored. Otherwise, the ability would just be the exact same as Inspiring Presence, and, what would be the point? Until the end of the battle round, each fighter you've picked, so that'll be up to 3, can use the Inspiring Presence ability without needing or using any ability dice. Okay, so here's the complication. You need the hero rune mark to use the Inspiring Presence ability. Is this ability which says the fighter can use the ability, giving permission to use it without the hero rune mark? Right now, the community isn't sure, but seems to be leaning towards the assumption that the intention was to give permission, but the rules as written don't allow it. Personally, I suspect the idea here is to give the bonus action to a nearby fighter and then let you pick out your 2 heroes anywhere on the battlefield and give them that free Inspiring Presence option. So because this is going to be your leader and you're going to have only, or he's going to be a hero, and you're going to have only 2 other heroes, you can either pick a non-hero to get the next chain in the line, and your other 2 heroes can then get free Inspiring Presence, or you could pick one of your other heroes as one of those, as the first fighter, and then they'll still get the Inspiring Presence, and then you'll pick one other because you've only going to have a max 3, so only 2 others. So that's what I think was going on there. So I don't think it's supposed to give you permission. But yeah, the consensus right now is that's the way we play it. So you need to use that inspiring presence part on your other heroes for it actually to be beneficial. Okay. Does this work? I'm not sure. It's an interesting idea. So inspiring presence is an ability that has won me games before, but it's not one I'm looking to use every game. We have also seen Chain Activation Team appear with the Claws of Karnak without much success. You can do some quite interesting things with this. So, so you can have your leader activate the other leader, who will then use inspiring presence, activate the third or hero, and then they'll have the free inspiring presence to activate, I don't know, your wildebeest or something at the end. And that's 4 fighters activating in a chain. It could be pretty impressive. You're going to be able to alpha something. Doing that though, you're spending a triple, and you're not getting any other real benefit out of it from your chieftain. Then, because your other heroes are also spending triples, they are not going to be able to use it for any other abilities. So essentially, you're going to have all of your heroes not using abilities, and instead they're going to be using inspiring presence in the chain. They're not using dice though, which is a benefit, but they're still not maximizing their damage output, which is normally what you're looking to do with your big guys and your heroes. Anyway, it's interesting. It opens up more options. Yeah, and I guess again, it's another cool model. Not one I currently have, but one I do intend to get. So I'm not quite sure what to think about that ability. I think I need to play around with it a bit. I don't think it's particularly exciting. I don't think it's something that you're necessarily going to be looking to try do, and definitely not something you can do outside of faction. This is only going to work on other Darkoath, so you're going to have to keep it in-house. All right, moving on from that. Of a lot more interest, we have the Darkoath War Queen. So again, this is a previously existing model. There is another profile for her on the Slave's Darkness, but this one is distinct and is separate. Although it does mean if you wanted, you could go look at that Slave's Darkness one and you could recruit it in from the other side. The damage and wounds are about right for 165 points. The shield gives a toughness of 5, which will make her a little harder to kill. Her ability is Rally the Tribes, which is a triple that will give nearby Darkoath with the Warrior rune mark a bonus move. As a bonus, if the War Queen is favored, then those nearby fighters count as one additional fighter for contesting objectives. This is big. As we'll see later, the normal rank and file Darkoath have the Warrior rune mark. And at the start, so round 1, you're able to pop this triple and get a big boost of movement. So you're able to get tons of moves. Well, it's going to be whoever's next to her. So it'll be maybe 2 or 3 within her battle group, depending on what your split is like. Then later, you're going to be able to use triples to have them hold objectives. So if you've got 3 and her sitting on an objective, so 4, then pop this ability. She is favored. Then all of a sudden you turn into 7. That's massive. That's really, really good. You're going to be able to position her in places where you're contesting, hopefully moving near the end. Obviously, you're going to need to get the kill for her, but that balance of early movement and then late game objective holding is going to be very, very significant. In games where objectives aren't important, where you're going to be, killing treasure or holding treasure or killing people, then she has a great profile. She's going to be able to do a lot of work, and maybe you can focus those triples elsewhere, or you can just keep using it for the movement. Really, really good character. Very, very impressed with this. Really, really like it. Again, not something that's going to ally elsewhere, because she does need those Darkoath warriors for it actually to be able to function. Next up, we have the Fell Rider champion with Axe. As often happens with the mounted troops, here we have a fast fighter with a lot of wounds, but not much damage. That 3.3 we'd expect to see on an 80-point model, not 140 point. So we're paying a lot for that 10 move and those 20 wounds. The ability is a double, which will remove wounds equal to half the ability's value. So half of what you'd get with the universal triple, respite, but without the annoying clause of being outside melee, and this obviously is a double rather than triple. If the fighter is favored, you get an extra +3. I really like that's a +3 rather than changing it to the value. It means if you're popping a double 1 that you would get from being favored, then that you can use that to heal 4 wounds straight away, which is very, very nice. The synergy here on that particular synergy is nice, but unfortunately, I think the profile isn't worth it. I'm a real big fan of the Sylvaneth Kernot Hunters, which are big, scary things. And then the Sylvaneth have this double that lets them heal up if you need to. This could be similar if it was on a better profile, but it's not. That unfortunately, the damage really, really lets it down. And just the way the points are constructed, something needs to give. You can't be super fast, super tough, super damage, and then cheap all at once. Yeah, and unfortunately, I think this particular character kind of suffers from that. If this ability had been universal across the warband, I would have been a lot more impressed. But alas, no, it is not. The non-hero version of the Fell Rider is similar, so fast and chunky but with low damage for its points. Again, I absolutely love the models for these, but I'm not sure how I would fit them into a list. Maybe they'd be good fast objective holders. So with 18 wounds, they certainly wouldn't be easy to kill, and that ability will let them heal them up to take some damage. But yeah, so okay, back to a leader profile. Here we have a different weapon. This is using a Javelin instead. In this case, that's a ranged attack as a second weapon option. The melee damage is worse, and the points have actually gone up 5. Again, it is really limited by its weak damage, I think. So even when you factor in the fact that it's ranged and you can kind of stay put and double the damage, it's only 1.6 going to 3.2. That's it's not really worth it for 145. We do get a different ability though. So this is a double called Swift Attacker. Now it can only be used after making a move action that gets you into melee, and it gives you a bonus range action against a target in melee. So as we can see, that's only 1.6 average damage. So while getting that free attack is nice, it's not great. However, if you're favored, you get to add the ability value of the double as points to each hit and crit. So best case, you're looking at a double 6. That will significantly increase the damage to 7.6 because it's such low dice values. Then you follow up with a 2.6 melee swing. That's pretty cool. But again, it only works when you're on the charge. Spend a double, and importantly, you've already got a kill in to get you favored. And yeah, you've already spent the double to get you oathed in the first place. So no, again, I think this unfortunately gets let down by the base profile it has. Yeah, it's a neat idea, but just not quite there. As before, we also have a non-hero version, which is the same ability, but the stats are a little weaker. The hero to melee ability is actually the same as the hero version, which I think is a plus for this profile. Because, yeah, even though the Javelin is slightly less damage, so was it 1.3 instead of the 1.6, the bonus you're getting is really off the ability and it's off the dice value of the ability. So, you're not too upset to see that lose a little bit of damage because much of the damage is actually just going to come off of the dice value. Again, I don't think this is great. I think if I did have this box, I'd probably build them as javelins and use them as the non-elites or as the non-heroes. Yeah, but yeah, I'm not a fan of this cavalry, unfortunately. A common problem with cavalry is just how these things unfortunately are. Moving away from cavalry, we finally get into the Marauder box. So these are the two variants of the hero version, and broadly both have the same issues as we saw earlier with the cavalry, but not quite as bad. So the weapon damage is below the curve for these points, while the health is above the curve, or about the curve. The difference between them is we're trading a little damage here for reach, which I normally consider to be a good deal. And they do have the warrior trait, which opens them up as a target for the Warcry, which honestly is a big deal. There isn't any special hero ability in this warband. Yeah, so it just kind of is what it is. Let's move on to the non-hero version and see what we can get. Again, we have a spear and a sword or axe version. Both are the same price at 70, but with different damage. For both the wounds, they are about right for 80 points. So, it's a little... at 70, it's a good deal, I guess. Unfortunately, the damage is a little bit low for the points. So The melee is worth about 65, and then the spear is worth about 50 before you factor in the reach. For reference, I pulled out the Iron Golem's Legionnaire, who was 75 points. That does slightly less damage, but not much. Has 5 toughness and 2 more wounds. Now, the Legionnaires aren't particularly exciting, but I really like them as a baseline and they really get the job done. In this case, the Marauder does benefit from that bonus move to the War Queen, which really increases the value. And then later in the game, they are going to be able to count as additional fighters for contesting objectives, which can be big depending on the mission you have. Obviously, a box of these, I have 10 of these because I bought the box individually. And then if you've got the Darkoath army box, which last I checked in my local store was on special offer, they had 20. So you've got plenty of options to go with spears or with axes or swords, whatever you prefer. Again, this will probably be the core of your warband. And you're going to be using the War Queen to power them up. So that's going to be the kind of central concept that you're going to build around. Then we have the Wilderfiend. So this is a chunky beast at 300 points. So it is a considerable investment. For that, you get 5 toughness and 35 wounds. I would consider that near unkillable. It is 6 move, so super fast, and has an average damage of 13, which is absolutely crazy. That is better damage than a Mega Boss, although at considerable more points. Notably, unlike the Mega Boss with its move 3, this thing is super fast with a move 6. As a beast, it can't open doors, which is probably good for my nightmares, and it can't carry treasure. It doesn't get to swear oaths, and it cannot become favored. It doesn't have the warrior rune mark, so it can't benefit from the War Queen. So it basically completely lacks synergy with the warband, which actually is quite thematic in a way. So this would have been a Darkoath warrior who accepted too many blessings of the Chaos Gods and basically ended up going insane. And now they are feral monsters that roam the borders of their tribe's territory, just as likely to murder their old kin, but still with that kind of last spark of loyalty and protecting the clan from other monsters, essentially. So thematic, I absolutely love them. And yeah, it's a giant ball of stats. It does have one ability that is unique to it. So this is a quad, and I always recommend you ignore quads. But if one of your favorite can trigger their reaction before they die, you will get a free quad out of this. So maybe in this case, the quads aren't completely crazy to look at for this particular warband. And actually, it's a real disincentive for your opponent to go after your favorite fighters, which will be your scariest. Because if they actually manage to kill them, then you're getting a quad out of it, and you're going to be able to use that quad somewhere. All right, let's look at it. So it's a bit of a long one. You get a free Inspiring Presence. So after the Wilderfiend is done, another friendly fighter within 6 inches can act. Interesting. That does seem to indicate that that's a team across this. As I said, I think it's something I'll need to play with a few times to actually decide whether I think it's good. But, depending on the turn, how we look, we might have cases where you're going for big alpha strikes and getting to activate 3 or 4 fighters all at once to try take out your enemy before they have a chance to do anything. Then after the Inspiring Presence, you can also pick a damage to do some direct damage to it. So it's based on rolling dice, essentially, and the value of the quad, I think, is it? 6 inches, roll 6 dice. So the value of and you can't rely on quads to be anything, but really it's 1.5 times the ability dice value on average. So if you're rolling a quad 1, you're probably going to do 1 to 2 damage. So not much. I guess if you had a quad 6, but as I said, we're probably going to be getting our quads off of our favorite fighters dying than anything else. We're not done though. You also get to add 2 attacks to this fighter for the rest of the turn. So assuming we're getting to attack twice, so they're already melee when they use this ability, that will get them 4. Now they have 6 dice on the attack normal, so this is almost a full extra attack. And because of the insane damage, it's basically an extra 8.6 extra damage. So it is quite nice. It is kind of equivalent to getting off a rampage that you would otherwise, but with some extra bonuses and kind of extra things here and there. So yeah, the very, very nice option to have. Overall, though, I really like this fighter. I think it is a little frustrating that we don't have that. Here we have a fighter with all the stats, but without any of the abilities. And then my criticism with some of the other fighters is we've got abilities, but we don't have stats. Anyway, that's how it is. Yeah, and I gather this kit can be built in a few different ways, so you can really kind of customize your own Wilderfiend for your own tribe, which is kind of fun. All right, so all of that was fighters from the generic Darkoath box that came out in the April release. We do have another 5 fighters to look at, and those are the ones from brands Oathbound. Now, I have this box myself, and I absolutely love it for the models, but it was very, very expensive, so keep that in mind. In fact, I think, yeah, it was expensive for what you get, basically. Broadly, these are all teamed around existing fighters for the most part. So Brand is a Chieftain, Tari is a War Queen. Actually, and that essentially is it. I think that the rest of them all have slightly different takes. So each are unique, so you can only ever take one of each at a time. So you can only have Gunner Brand once. You can't have 2 Gunner Brands. And then, you can have all 5 in the Warband if you wanted. Okay, and yeah, let's see what options we get out. Hopefully we'll get something a little bit more interesting, and hopefully they'll be able to tie the entire Darkoath together. Okay, so we've got Gunner Brand first. Now, he is the leader of his tribe. He's the one that has to make all those hard decisions. And often, as happens with the Darkoath, it's whether to take power to protect his people, but risk, being overwhelmed by the gifts of the gods. So you try to take power, but maybe not too much power. Use the power of the gods, but don't rely on it. Try, stay free. Gunner is 25 points more than a Chieftain, does a little bit more damage, and has 5 more wounds. He loses the War Chief ability and instead gets a triple Carve a Path to Glory. This adds half the value to his attacks. He already has 5 attacks, so you're getting about 1.3 damage per attack dice. So half that again for values, if you know what I mean. And then that will be for the rest of the turn rather than just the next attack, which is quite nice. So yeah, so if you've got a quad 6, you're going to be adding 3.9 damage to his attacks, and then you're going to do that twice. That's pretty good. That will help us get kills, which is kind of key. If we get the kills, or if we've already sworn oaths and then we get the kills, then he will be favored. And when he is favored, instead of getting half the value, you get the full value. So you're getting even more damage. So that 6 wouldn't be half anymore. It would be 6 by 1.3. So you do an extra 6 point, basic maths, 18, 7.8 damage on top of his 6.6. And then you're doing that big. Obviously, a 666 isn't something you rely on. You're probably going to be seeing more 111s in this particular warband just by the nature of it. But still, you're able to boost the damage, which is what we're looking for. Okay. Yeah, so I think a lot of time you're going to use Oath of Murder turn 1 with him, and then try get your triples to power him up and get those kills later. And then you're going to be using the triples to, after he's favored, to do even more damage. So he is going to be very ability hungry. This is a fighter that you want to get a double turn 1, and then you're going to be looking to give him a triple each turn from there on out, assuming you can get into combat with him. Singri Brand is Gunner's daughter. She is the same steel within her as her father, but where he has fury and action, she has a sharp mind and the patience of a hunter. Her profile is modeled, I guess, on the Javelin Fell Riders, which is an unfortunate start, but she does have a much more impressive range at 18, and her range profile is actually better than her melee profile, which is something I like to see. Being able to move 10 inches and have 18 range gives her a massive board access, but it does come at a pretty nasty cost. And on top of that, she has 25 wounds, which is nice and chunky. At 200 points, she is actually undercosted for this profile, and which actually should be closer to 270, so it's a really big discount that she's getting. But yeah, she's still only doing 2.6 average damage. So, is that worth it all for 200? I'm not entirely sure. If we look at the ability, we'll see it's another triple. This warband is going to be super hungry for triples. And then they're constantly using the doubles for the oaths, even if they're going to get them back. Yeah, okay. This will be a problem. The ability is called Uncanny Shot. So for the rest of the turn, add half the ability to the attacks. So like Brand, and her while her damage is low at 2.6, she actually has low dice numbers, so she only rolls 2. So getting an extra dice is going to give her actually the same as Brand gets per dice, so an extra 1.3 per attack dice. This also changes to the value of the ability rather than half if she's favored, but nicely, it also works if the target is in melee with Gunner Brand, so she doesn't actually have to be favored to get the benefit. Unfortunately, due to the rules around missile attacks, to be able to do that, she's going to have to get it within 3 inches of the target. Now, it's a nice little father-daughter thing, but as they're both competing for triples, I think we're probably going to end up spending what usually is our one and only triple per turn on Gunner instead. War Queen Tari comes from another tribe. She's actually not part of Gunner Brand's warband or tribe. And for a long time, they were rivals or enemies, but circumstances led them to an uneasy truce for a while. And then later, throughout the Darkoath book, they maybe get something closer to respect, if maybe not actual friendship. Tari is 30 points more than the War Queen, losing her Rally the Tribes triple and instead getting her own unique one. She has 5 more wounds, 1 less toughness, and is 1 move faster. Her weapon profile is the same, which did surprise me, as I was hoping the Spirit would give her a bit of reach. And that gets factored in actually with her ability. So her ability is a triple, again another triple, called War Queen's Fury. She gets a bonus melee action against every enemy target within 1 inch of her. If she's favored, that extends out to 3 inches, and her weapon gains reach 3. So there's a spear kicking in. That's pretty good for a triple. You don't necessarily need her to be favored, to be fair, but being able to get bonus attacks on a triple is good enough. And getting into melee with 2 targets isn't normally particularly hard. It's certainly going to surprise your opponent. She does decent damage. She's able to get those bonus attacks. So yeah, and if she is favored, if she gets in a kill, not necessarily something I'd be focusing on, but if she does, I'd probably try get Gunner favored first. But if we get Tari favored as well, that extra reach could mean 3 or 4 attacks that you're managing to get off in that triple, which is a lot of bonus damage. So that's not to be sniffed at, especially against chaff warbands. Broken Nadia is the shaman of the tribe, so she reads the signs and watches for the winds of the gods. She has what I think is a pretty typical caster profile with that 3 to 7 range, but the damage is actually really, really good. So it's a range attack that does an average of 3 damage. She is slow, so she only has 3 move, but she has decent wounds for the points. I know it's only 15, but she's just 95 points. It is, yeah, and she has an ability. Again, it's another triple. Unfortunately, way too many triples in this warband. It's a straight point and do damage ability. So it's got a range of 9 inches, pick an enemy, and then the damage on average will be 1.5 times the value of the ability dice. Basically the same as we had with the Wilderfiend. Really frustrating. I think that we're seeing a lot of triples that rely on values when we're getting triple ones from the reaction. Yeah, it's unfortunately just is the way it is. It's a bit of a gap, I think, in the warband overall. Now, if Broken Nadia is favored, then the damage goes up to about 2.3 per value. Basically, she's rolling 9 dice instead of 6. It's not bad, but I think I'd probably spend my dice elsewhere. That said, I do quite like her as a ranged fighter. You're going to be able to move her position. Hopefully, she's quite slow at 3. But then, subsequent rounds, hopefully she can basically do 6 damage with her no moving, doing 2 attacks at 3 to 7. Yeah, it could be. It could be. Maybe I'm not entirely convinced, but I really like the model, so I'll probably play just because of that and try out. Last up, we have Dendril Direbrand. Now, the Direbrand is a family within the Brand tribe. I'm not sure if I picked this up correctly for the book, but I got the impression that the Direbrands were once members of the Sea of Sigmar, and then due to whatever happened, ended up joining the Brands and then got accepted into Darkoath, probably many, many generations ago. I might have picked that up wrong, but that was certainly the impression I got. And it also kind of ties into the whole humanity thing. So, like the cities of Sigmar and the Darkoath are still humans, but for some reason there's this big divide between them because of circumstance and the way they look at each other. Anyway, Dendril is the smith within the tribe, and he is a voice of some influence. People do look up to him. His wounds are about right for 150 points, and his damage for about 130. So he is quite well statted for 125 points. Alas, we have another triple here. So we either accept that some of our fighters will not get to use their abilities, or we try to be a little bit more optimistic and think of these as options in where we apply our one triple. So we've got, options. The ability here is quite interesting. Essentially, you ignore strength and toughness, and instead, the fighter's always going to hit on 3+. So it's like giving him infinite strength. If he's favored, then crits also happen on a 5+, which essentially adds a 1.2 extra damage. But yeah, so here, that 6.6 that would be against T3. If he uses the triple, that's going to be against everything. So it's probably not worth using against T4 because it's only giving you a 1.3 increase. But you're getting 2.6 if you're going up against T5. And then at every other bracket above that, it's always the same. So it's not a massive increase, but if you've got an enemy target that's got really high toughness and you're kind of struggling to take him down, then this is one that's able to kind of break through all that and get some damage in. Weirdly enough, the other approach for doing that is to have a strength 2 fighter who does terrible damage, but he will be consistently doing the same damage against all the toughness tiers all the way up from 3 all the way. But yeah, that's a different approach. Again, quite an interesting fighter. All right, let's talk about the warbands in general. I will say I don't like the mounted fighters apart from the mounted chieftain. The standard troopers, so that's the marauders, at 70 points are kind of vanilla. Not super exciting, but not bad by any regards. The War Queen bonus ability, though, is super good, both for moving and contesting objectives, and that significantly increases the value of the Marauders. So I would always start with the War Queen and at least 2 Marauders. That would be her battle group, if you want. I also really like Gunnar Brand and War Queen Tari. So out of those 4, I guess I could happily pick any of those 4 heroes, or 3 out of those 4 heroes, and consider that to be a solid start. And then maybe just add in a bunch of Marauders and see how that bounces out. Nadia and Dendril are decent options, I think, depending on the points. And I think the Wilderfiend could be a lot of fun, even if it doesn't necessarily synergize too well with the Warband, but at least it's not being dice hungry. It can get the job done without you spending a single dice while you're spending the dice on all of your other heroes. Kind of go with that. Without any low-cost fighters, I did find it quite tricky to put warbands together that hit exactly 1k without using some blessings. I did find one option, which was Gunnar, a War Queen, a Marauder Champion, which I'm not hot on, but that was a way to spend points, 4 Marauders, and a Wilderfiend. So that'll be 1k exactly. So it's 8 models, and there are some really, really scary fighters in there. I think turn 1, the triple goes to the War Queen to get her group of Marauders moving. The doubles go to Gunnar first, and then the champion second to start oathing them up. I would have put one over to the War Queen, but for the first move, the ability that she needs to be doing is going to be that triple. Now, what you could do is you could spend a triple on her and then oath her. Start with a wait with her, and then use a triple, and then oath her with a double afterwards. But otherwise, try get on her turn 2, try get the oath down on her turn 2, because you are probably, maybe not, if it's an objective based mission, you want to get her favored as soon as you can. But yeah, I think Gunnar is going to be able to pump out a lot of damage if you can get him favored. And yeah, on turn 1, the champion is a decent second option for that. Then what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to use those triples to boost Gunnar's damage as best we can. That's going to get him favored, and then later it's going to give him more. And then in maybe the last 2 turns, we're probably going to switch back to trying to get that War Queen's ability going to steal objectives. And as we're doing this, hopefully we're going to free up more doubles to oath more fighters and kind of chain the abilities as we go along. And then in the last turn, maybe we're going to lose one of our heroes, and hopefully that will power up our other fighter. So maybe we'll get a quad out of it, and the Wilderfiend will get to do a little bit more damage. Okay. What else can we do? We have options. We obviously can ally in some of the other heroes from the other Chaos Warband. So we could get Vexmore or Crusher in. But there isn't really anything in the Warband that plays nice with others. Similarly, you can't take the War Queen and add her to another Warband, who I think is a kind of standout piece, as she relies on Darkoath fighters. Now, Gunner and Tanari are decent options for other Warbands. I do in particular like Gunner, as they're like really self-focused. They don't really care about anyone else. And you can actually oath them and use their triples without worrying about the whatever other warband you've got. So this does let you bank a double on an oath on turn one, which I really, really like as an option for any warband. And then you're going to get that double out later. It's also quite nice that the reaction will sometimes let you turn a dead hero into a triple, or even better, a quad. So yeah, Gunner by himself in another warband, or even just within the Darkoath, is going to be able to get in and do a lot of damage. And if your opponent tries to focus and tries to get him down, they need to do one of two things. They need to let him activate, which is a win for you, or bring him low enough damage down that he is going to react, I guess. Yeah. And then if you're going to need to time it right. I guess reacting and then they don't kill you would be kind of bad. You've wasted an action for it. But if you're favored and your hero, or just if you're favored, you're going to get a quad out of it, which is, even though it's quad one, is going to be able to help you power up extra abilities, kind of make up for the fact that you've lost that fighter. So there's a kind of a bit of give and take. It is interesting. I think that one approach is win more. So oathing up is a win more to get favored. If you're killing, you get the benefit, you get the double dice. Whereas the reaction is a comeback, since you've lost the fighter and you're getting more dice to kind of make up for that. That is kind of fun, back and forth. So I think, yeah, you're going to be pushing in your doubles at the start, and then hoping you can get your doubles and triples and quads out at the end in the kind of later phases you start losing fighters. Now, one thing is, we are getting triple ones, quad ones, double ones. Double ones, great. The triples that we have in this warband are very dependent on values, which is really, really frustrating, because we're not getting values, we're getting ones. So it might be worth looking to see if there is an ally in, that we could get from one of the other Chaos warbands that likes triples. I mean, the Varangard does quite like triples. So if the Varangard gets a kill and has a triple one floating around, it's able to get an extra move and extra attack. So that might be good. So are you just looking to power up your Varangard with extra attacks? Yeah, that could be spicy. So yeah, they either take down your Varangard, which is tricky enough to do, or they take down your heroes, which power up your Varangard. Yeah, anyway. I do think the Oath idea is nice. It maybe could have been a little bit better developed with maybe some generic abilities that keyed off favored rather than all of these unique ones. And maybe things will improve once or if this warband gets a battle trait. All right, overall, is this warband going to win tournaments? I doubt it. It's not going to be bad. It does look decent, and there are some nice moving parts. Is it going to look great and be fun? Absolutely. I am midway through painting up the Marauders that I have, and as I said, I do have the Chieftain on mount, and I've already done all of Gunner's guys. So yeah, I'll be picking up a Wilderfiend, and that's a very, very happy warband for me, and I'm looking forward to playing them a lot. All right, thanks for listening. Don't forget that I often make mistakes, and typically I'm looking at stuff that's relatively fresh. So this has only come out in the last week. So have a look through the comments and have a look and see if someone has spotted something that I didn't, or if they're correcting something I haven't. If you do see, or if you heard me misspeak, please do comment so that people who are looking at this video later and are trying to work out what's going on can see where I made errors and you can correct them. So I really appreciate when people do that. I'm not offended when people correct my mistakes. That is a big win for everyone involved. All right. hope you enjoyed this video. Have a great week, and we'll look at maybe the Reclusians. We'll look at the next warband that came out soon enough. The FAQ is fantastic. If you haven't had a chance to look over it, do check out Off Meta Musings video on it, which I'll link below, and do check out Salty Seas as well, which similarly has some interesting insights into the new changes. All very, very exciting. All right, have a good day and have a good week. Thanks for making it all the way to the end. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Each week I put up a new video talking about one of Games Workshop's specialist games. The goal is always to try and make the best possible two-player experience. If this is something you'd find interesting, please subscribe to the channel and comment to let me know what you'd like to see in future.